Australia has a strong connection with the people of the Philippines. We have and we will continue to be supportive of their peaceful and prosperous development. This motion was prompted by a meeting I had with a delegation of labour organisations, including the Australian Manufacturers Workers Union, the ACTU, Union Aid Abroad and the Filipino Workers Representative Group, Kilusang Mayu Uno. I thank them for raising this serious issue, and I particularly acknowledge the unstinting work of AFIDA in solidarity with workers around the world, but most importantly in countries where workplace rights and access to union representation is limited. We're fortunate to live in a country that has a diverse and healthy union movement, a country in which, generally speaking, there is respect and protection for the role of unions, despite the best efforts of the coalition. Sadly, there are many parts of the world where that is not the case. In partnership with the Metal Workers Alliance, AFIDA and the AMWU, the Australian union movement is providing invaluable education and support to Filipino union activists in response to the ongoing intimidation by law enforcement and intelligence agencies. Deputy Speaker, the reality for many workers in the Philippines is pretty tough. A skilled metal worker earns $12 a day in Manila. That's less than half of the daily cost of living for a family. There's no minimum wage and there's less than 10% of workers are unionised. It's commonly the case that union representatives are labelled factory terrorists by corporations that operate in the Philippines, some of which are multinational companies with brands that are well known here in Australia. The International Trade Union Confederation consistently ranks the Philippines among the 10 worst countries in the world for workers' rights. There's credible evidence that 46 union members and officials have been murdered in the past 3 years with at least the complicity of the Duterte government. There's also been an increase in violence directed at journalists in a bid to silence criticism and instill fear. Indeed, anyone who dares criticise the government can be targeted, as evidenced by the arrest of journalist Maria Ressa and the forced shutdown of ABS-CBN, which resulted in 11,000 media workers losing their jobs. Unfortunately, the situation has worsened through the pandemic, with the government moving to suppress union activities in areas of essential service work and healthcare, thereby hampering efforts to ensure safe workplaces and access to PPE. What's more, Deputy Speaker, in July the government passed the Anti-Terrorism Act, which criminalises conduct that is regarded by the United Nations as being legitimate forms of freedom of speech and freedom of assembly. Under that law, the compilation of a list of alleged terrorists by the newly created Anti-Terrorism Council has resulted in surveillance, arrests and detentions with a focus on the red tagging of unionists, journalists and other members of civil society. The Office of the UN Commissioner for Human Rights has expressed concerns that these laws violate the UN Declaration on Human Rights and the International Convention on Civil and Political Rights. Just last week, the ACTU held a rally at the Filipino Embassy, and President Michelle O'Neill rightly called on the Australian government to take a more active stance. In October, Minister for Defence Senator Reynolds visited the Philippines for the purposes of deepening defence ties. We don't know if she raised concerns about human rights during these talks, but we do know that the minister's public statements contain no mention of the issue. Deputy Speaker, the Morrison government should be calling on the Duterte administration to stop the practice of red tagging against trade unions and civil society organisations, accept the ILO high-level tripartite mission to the Philippines, repeal any measures within the Anti-Terrorism Act that are inconsistent with human rights, and ensure the health, safety and security for all Filipino workers. Deputy Speaker, workers' rights are human rights. There has been no greater organisational force for good and for human progress than the labour movement. All the best things we've achieved, democracy, equality, egalitarianism, anti-discrimination, peace and freedom, all these things have been fought for, campaigned for and bit by bit achieved or improved or protected with the efforts and principled commitment of organised labour by unionists and their representatives in the union movement. This year has opened our eyes to the importance of essential workers, to the importance of fair and safe working conditions, to the importance of secure work and proper leave arrangements, not just for workers and their families, but for the maintenance of basic services and public health. Yet workers' pay has fallen to the lowest share of national income in 50 years, and wages have flatlined in a worrying disconnection from profits and productivity. If there's one thing we should carry into 2021, whether it's in the Philippines or in Australia, is that we need a strong labour movement as the great guarantor of fairness, social inclusion and equality.
I thank the honourable member. The question is the motion be agreed to, and I give the call to the member for and we're looking for a second before I give the call to the member for Sturt. Is there a seconder for the motion?